Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the massive, high-stakes world of how the global economy physically moves. You know, when you look out at a bright, sunlit ocean, you might just see, well, water. But what you're actually looking at is the busiest, most fiercely contested superhighway on planet Earth. We're going to pull back the curtain on the incredible, hidden networks that deliver almost absolutely everything we buy, build, and consume.
So, it begs the question, how do you control the most expensive game on Earth? In a world where the cost of a single vessel can literally rival a massive Hollywood blockbuster's budget, the major players realized a long time ago that going solo, that's just a quick way to sink. The answer to this is hiding right in plain sight out on our oceans. They team up, even the absolute bitterest of rivals.
Act 1. The First Ocean Cartels.
Okay, to really understand today's mega alliances, we've got to go back to the cutthroat Wild West origins of the industry. Back in the early 1800s, liner ships were running these incredibly long, slow routes from England out to places like Bombay and Calcutta, but then technology just hit fast forward. We got iron-hulled ships, and in 1869, the Suez Canal opened up. Suddenly, voyage times were slashed completely in half. Now, you'd think that would be amazing for business, right? Well, ironically, all this speed and efficiency caused a massive oversupply of ships, and freight rates crashed abysmally low. To survive this absolute financial bloodbath, the ship owners in the 1870s realized they had to stop fighting and start colluding. They formed the very first cartels, which they politely called conferences. And just how ruthless were those early cartels? Let me tell you, if an independent ship dared to try and sail on a conference route, the cartel would deploy what they called fighting ships. And it's exactly as aggressive as it sounds. They would literally shadow the independent competitor with a ship of their own, operating on the exact same schedule, but charging predatory, totally loss-making prices. The cartel would absorb those losses together, basically bleeding the independent operator dry until they went bankrupt or surrendered and joined the cartel. Eventually, though, the rest of the world decided these cartels simply had way too much power. Fast forward to 1983, and the United Nations tried to step in with the UNCTAD code. They introduced this incredibly rigid 40-40-20 formula. Basically, it worked like this. The exporting country gets 40% of the trade, the importing country gets 40%, and third parties are left to fight over the remaining 20%. Now, it was supposed to protect developing nations, but it backfired completely. It was overly bureaucratic, heavily protectionist, and it basically destroyed free competition. But this meant the era of the classic conference cartel was finally ending, making way for the modern era of containerization.
Act 2. Why Giant Ships Team Up.
So, the old cartels might be dead, but the need to cooperate? That definitely isn't. Today, it's not about crushing the little guy with a fighting ship, it's about sheer financial survival, and it's all driven by a crucial number, $12,000. That is the typical capital investment cost per TEU. And a TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit, basically just one of those standard shipping containers. Now, multiply that 12 grand by a modern megaship that can carry 20,000 of those containers. You are looking at $250 million just to build one single ship. Liner shipping is just incredibly capital intensive. Trying to own and operate enough of these titans to offer a global service all by yourself, it's financial suicide. And if these carriers fail, the entire supply chain breaks, and the price of literally everything sitting in your living room skyrockets.
And the pressure doesn't even stop once the ship is actually built. There is this terrifying concept in the industry called perishable capacity. Think of it like a cinematic ticking clock. It's kind of like a commercial airline flight. Once that airplane takes off, any empty seat is revenue loss forever, right? You can't sell yesterday's seat tomorrow. Well, in shipping, the moment a massive vessel leaves the port, any unused space on that ship is totally unusable until it reaches a loading port again. It is literally empty space, burning fuel, and hemorrhaging money every single second. So, to beat that ticking clock and handle those absolutely massive costs, carriers have no choice but to form alliances. It allows them to share those terrifying capital costs we just talked about. It lets them pool their cargo so they can actually fill those giant ships, unlocking massive economies of scale. Plus, modern businesses demand just-in-time inventory, which means they need ships departing constantly. By teaming up, rivals can offer a super high-frequency schedule and expand their global reach, all without having to buy a single new ship. It is, for sure, the ultimate survival strategy.
Act 3. How to share a ship. Now, it's one thing to say you're going to team up with your biggest rival. It's another entirely to figure out the logistics of how you actually pull it off without losing your own competitive edge. Let's dig into the details. There are two main ways they do this. First, you have slot charter agreements, or SCAs. This is basically just renting space.
It's a simple contract where one carrier operates the ship and another carrier just buys a fixed percentage of the space on board. Simple enough. But then you have the much more intense vessel sharing agreements, or VSAs. This isn't just renting a room, this is moving in together. In a VSA, multiple companies actively share vessels they own, jointly optimizing the schedules and assigning ships to specific routes together as a single team.
Let's actually look at a vessel sharing agreement in action. Take the Midas Service Consortium. It takes 10 vessels to run this specific 70-day port rotation smoothly. Now, instead of one company trying to front all 10 ships, Heavyweights Maersk and CMA CGM split the load. Maersk provides 6 vessels, CMA CGM provides 4. They share the physical burden, but they keep their schedules running absolutely flawlessly for their customers.
But hey, here's a massive, absolutely crucial caveat you need to know. The alliance has very strict boundaries. They are sharing the ride, but they are absolutely still competing on the business end. Global alliances cover the integration of ships, the sailing schedules, and terminal use, but they never ever cover joint sales, marketing, pricing, or profit sharing. It's a logistical truce, not a corporate marriage. They share the physical deck space out on the water, but back in the boardroom, they are still fighting fiercely for your cargo.
The rewards for finding that perfect balance are just huge. Take the year 2005, for example. Mid-sized carriers MISC, MOL, NYK, OCL, and PIL all banded together. By forming a strategic alliance, they were able to combine forces to launch entirely new collaborative routes covering China, Singapore, and New Zealand. Listen, none of them could easily justify the massive risk of entering those new markets all alone, but together, they unlocked a whole new geographic region and generated massive mutual growth.
Act 4. The Sheriffs of the Sea.
Okay, so when massive corporations team up to control the flow of global trade, somebody has to make sure they play fair, right? Enter the formidable international regulators. On the global roster, you've got the FMC in the USA monitoring trade agreements. You have the powerful DG Comp in the European Union totally focused on antitrust enforcement. And you've got the CCI in India actively working to prevent anti-competitive behavior. These are the heavy-hitting watchdogs of the oceans, heavily policing that very, very thin line between operational efficiency and illegal cartels.
Let's look a little closer at the U.S. Federal Maritime Commission, the FMC. They operate almost like a maritime intelligence agency. They actively profile and track carrier behavior. They're constantly surveying to ensure lines aren't secretly colluding outside of their filed agreements. They track for any unreasonable cost impacts on consumers. They probe unfair practices by foreign governments, and they ensure everyone is strictly abiding by the U.S. Shipping Act. Bottom line, they are always watching.
And if you think these sheriffs are just paper tigers, think again. 9.4 billion euros? That is the staggering amount of fines handed out by the European Union's DG Comp between 2005 and 2009 alone. So yeah, these regulators have serious teeth. If an alliance steps out of line and crosses over into illegal price fixing or cartel behavior, the financial punishments are absolutely cinematic in their scale.
But, regulators aren't just there to blindly drop the hammer. They actually understand reality. They know the global economy completely relies on these giant ships. For instance, India's CCI explicitly grants legal exemptions to shipping lines that use those vessel sharing agreements we talked about. Regulators recognize that a VSA isn't some malicious cartel trying to ruin the market. It's a necessary operational reality that actually keeps freight rates stable and ensures the ships keep sailing on time.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating paradox to consider. In a world demanding an endless, completely uninterrupted supply of goods, can we actually afford completely free, unbridled competition? Or are these blockbuster mega alliances literally the only realistic way to keep the massive, expensive machinery of global trade moving? It's a really delicate balance between preventing monopolies and ensuring sheer survival out on the high seas. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep your eyes on the horizon, because this industry, it never stops moving.